Okay, yes, good morning to all of you, and it's lovely to be here. That was a brilliant presentation that we just listened to by Sam. So very close to what we were looking at in New College, Stamford. Now, the question itself sounds a mouthful, but I promise that it will come with diagrams to help you have an appreciation of what is it that we were trying to look for and why we were looking for it and what we found. So the question has already been read, so let me give you a little bit of context as to what brought us to that place. Now, functional skill maths department during the lockdown conducted a sample data analysis which identified exam topics that students consistently failed to achieve at level 1 and level 2. So what I mean by that is that we wanted to find out, so we sampled about, I think, 20 students level 2 and 20 students level 1. So it's their results, and these results, we get feedbacks in functional skills on how students performed in the exam. So which topics, which areas, you know, how well did they do in their, let's say, adding, subtracting, and ratio, percentages, and that kind of thing. So what we found out from that data is the data demonstrated that the most failed topics in functional math skills for both level 1 and level 2's decimals, fractions, and percentages. Now, well, there is no, it's not a big surprise there. We kind of know these are the main 3 topics the student really struggle with. And therefore we took those on board and, you know, took the, got some, analyzed some data on it. And an example of this is that 81.25% of students at functional skills level 2 failed and could not solve increase or decrease percentage questions. At level 1, functional skill math student could not do 5%, only 5% of students could calculate simple interest in multiples of 5. Now, I'm not sure this data, obviously exam boards do feedback, you know, analysis, feedback data on performance of in exams and so forth, but I'm not sure that there's data out there for, you know, national data on how students perform on this. Okay, so that's quite interesting. So what can we do? So we look to see what we can do to change this story. So the number of students who took part in this were around 100 student mark. So we took some classes focused on level 1 and level 2 students. And the ones who participated ended up being around the 100 students mark. And we were 2 lecturers and and 3 what we called maths specialist study mentors, which were LSAs, but with specialism in maths. And there's a distinction here between LSA and they come from that ilk, that background, because it's supporting in class. However, the difference is that they have a maths background and they're specialists. And in organization in New College Stamford, we are blessed with the study center where students go, and it's a very much appreciated feature, tool for students, you know, to go there and get support. So you find specialist staff there that supports students in whatever topics they are finding a challenge in the classroom. So that's the background. So with all of that involved in our context. Our aims were, we identified about 5 aims that we wanted to look at, and that is to investigate models of on-site support. So how are we, how do we support these students? To identify a mix of resources that required to achieve timely intervention for students to help them progress in functional skills level 1 and level 2, and obviously, especially in those 3 identified topics. To compare and analyze students' response to intervention in the classroom. Okay, so we think we're going to help them this way, but how do they feel about that? To identify what features of intervention sessions are particularly helpful to students, and embed those into good, and bring that into share that as good practice. And lastly is to share research, obviously, of our findings across the organization with senior management who make planning decisions and so forth. And obviously here we are, Center for Excellence in Maths Network, and doing the same, sharing that. So how did we start? Obviously, literature. So we wanted to look at math mastery, and obviously very much based on the Shanghai and Singapore model, seen as successful in 2020. We then wanted to incorporate that with what I've already talked about, the maths specialist support mentors, and see how that improves. We already know that in literature, for example, a study published by the European Journal of Special Needs Education in 2021 found that there's a correlation between lack of qualification requirements in subject areas that LSAs work in. So for example, if an LSA comes in class, I don't know whether this is shared experience, but in my experience, if an LSA comes to the classroom and is supporting a student in maths and already have her or his that LSA's background is a bit shaky in maths, then obviously the support will not be that great for that student. So there is a correlation between the support that the LSAs give in class and the poor performance of students if the confidence is not there from the LSAs. So we wanted to see and measure, given that it will be positive, because if you're coming in with a specialism and you're supporting a student, that confidence will be seen. But we just wanted to see how that plays up in the classroom and how students respond to it and the interactions that were taking place. So obviously caution is needed when implementing such support measures. When LSAs don't have the specialism, because it doesn't always equate to students achieving and progress. So you might think in the classroom, because especially in functional skills, maths, compared to GCSE, the level of need is so much higher, and therefore the need to really have this research explored and analyzed and feedback, and learned from and implement, good practice developed, is important for this for our students in functional skills. So the specialism in maths for SMM, my tongue is twisted now, SMMS, so 2 M's. So that's specialist maths mentor support. Within the standalone, AL has fostered a level of confidence and efficiency from which the students are benefiting. So this is the diagram I talked about, which is, we looked at this research 3 ways, and this is about that maths hub triangle within the classroom, having the math specialist support mentors in there, approaching the maths in a mastery way. And the other aspect that I haven't talked about is the specialist in maths software. How the college has invested in, we are well invested in maths as specialist softwares. How are students interacting? What are they getting out of it? And how can we continue to improve that experience for them? So the question still then concludes, I'm not going to read it again, it's there, but you can see the 3 dimensions of how this study went. So the mastery, the importance, we all know it's, to master your the numbers, then it's this questioning of who, what, why. And one of the things that really developed in our classrooms that helped students to really do this is the modeling, approach to maths and tiles, use of tiles, kinesthetics approaches to maths. So, and with that, the math specialist software, we blended it in within the classroom as part of learning for students. So we'll see how that goes. So there you are. So here are some examples of bar modeling for students that was quite popular, help student, visual students, kinesthetic learners. You can see at level 1, level 2, the progression on that and what students were working with. The use of color was really, really helpful, and the drawing of them, students really we promoted this quite well and students received it well. Okay, so we did do, we did want to know what students felt about modeling, for example, because it was very, very appreciated and well received. And we had 6 students of the 59 in the initial cycle were interviewed for 10 minutes, and how and this is how they felt about the mastery approach to maths. And we did the PowerPoint clouding of words, and this is what we had. And you can see the modeling came up quite high, and working with tiles actually. So that was quite positive, and it kind of fed to us that students were really appreciating that. Okay, so I did have some pictures. Unfortunately, I had a problem with my phone. The student had given their, they had, said that that's fine for them to, for the pictures to be shown, confidentiality, but unfortunately, that will be for another time when I really get hold of these pictures properly. But at the moment, the phone that were in could not, I could not transfer them safely onto my laptop. So there was a slight issue there. So apologies for that, but there was a lot of positivity in the classroom, and the progression in what they were doing, just that confidence, not even before even looking at the data of how they were looking, there was a very heightened confidence in the classroom. Okay, let's look at so we're looking at 3 ways. So we know that the math mastery was well received. We know that the mentors, because they are coming in with their specialism in maths, the level of confidence is being built in students, and we have data that showed that. However, we did have, it wasn't plain sailing when it came to the software, math specialist software. The data didn't quite show that students were doing extremely well in this, and the success was there. Equally, we could see, because work was not getting completed 100% all the time by students given in the software. Why was this? When we have tested the software, its interface, user-friendly, language, all these things had come. We had tested that, and we had researched that in another research. We know that we have good software, a good interactive online engagement for students. Why weren't they engaging as they should? So one of the things we found, and this is our data, we did go, we have some raw data that showed, for example, in first cycle, it all started very well. 73% Monday classes were engaging, but in cycle 2, only 45%. Tuesday, 36 were engaging, 17% in cycle 2. Wednesday, 73, 30% of students engaged in the software. So it was declining. So math specialist software was fairly received by the student and promoted by both the lecturers and the mentors, and identified as enhancing students' learning. However, the main challenges continue to be the issue of time within the classroom. So students with with needs and some with high needs, this issue of logging in, it takes time, and sometimes that meant that the momentum of the lesson was lost. So really there needs perhaps to be ways of looking how to have that smooth transition from we're doing this task and then let's now go onto our computers and log in and start navigating. So there's more time needed to do this. Task often meant the students complete this task. So sometimes because of loss of time, students learning, it meant that they needed to do the rest of learning in their own time and not get that one-to-one support. Equally, there was a question of the culture of homework seems to be in decline. When you encouraging students to complete this work at home always seem to be like not a thing. They want to do most of the work in the lesson, or can't log in, or the laptop wasn't working, the internet is not working at home. All kinds of issues like that were at play, even though for most of our students, they are given, for example, laptops and Chrome MacBooks and that kind of thing to take home, especially during the lockdown. So I expected for this actually to be well received and students really engaged because they were used to online learning during lockdown, but the data was telling us otherwise. So math specialist software can develop math skills. However, it does polarize students' opinions, both positively and negatively. It can be used to supplement additional learning, and if not implemented correctly, can give negative impact for student engagement. So it will be interesting, and I'll be listening and hearing from others on this topic.
Margaret, just a quick heads up, we've got about 4 minutes to go. Yeah.
So student diagnostic and questionnaire. So method and methodologies, we did use diagnostics. So I put an example there to show how we collated some of our data on qualitative and quantitative data, and how we analyzed it and what it was telling us in how they felt about specific topics, especially from the math mastery as we conducted it. And then what was good about these two bits of data, this is Cycle 1 and Cycle 2, is that there is tangible evidence of improvement and students starting to feel really good and confident about their approach to maths. Okay, one thing also that was interesting that we discovered was that when we were doing percentage modeling, this connection between the multiplication of tens, hundreds, and that should be 1,000 is a typo, and the dividing of tens, hundreds, and 1,000, again, this proved to be a hindrance, something that was derailing students' progression in this percentage work. So that was quite an interesting fight, and therefore able to focus on it. At the end of the research, students were asked how they felt, and the student peak at 46 feeling quite happy having taken part in the research, and 76% of students felt the research was quite beneficial to their learning. So this was one not very good, and quite beneficial at the height of this. So at the very height, at the 5 being the highest, have 76% of students saying how much they appreciated. So we felt that it was worth conducting the action research. So we do have a recommendation. One of the things that came out of this research was that we now have 45 minutes of math mastery, focusing on fraction, decimals, and percentages, and then incorporate that with the main lesson in every lesson. So that was really good. And that there is a standardization in the study center. So our study center now is working in unison with us and actually upping skills of some of the colleagues to approach their support of students in a math mastery approach to to supporting the students. So that was really, really good as well. So I'd like to thank our students, obviously not here, but feel really thankful for taking part, for Paula Davis, Ross, Kath, and everybody else who was involved in this project. And obviously time for questions later. I'm sure there's some that have been typed. So thank you very much for that.